Hello everybody and welcome back to 4th Age Guides. In this episode we are looking at the campaign prospects for the Kingdom of Dorwinion. This is a minor Northmen faction situated right here on the northwestern part of the Sea of Rune and stretching up the river running towards the regions of Dale. This is a minor faction. They are in fact the smallest faction on the map at the campaign start with only 2 provinces to their name. However, Dorwinion has a very interesting roster that is capable of producing some excellent units, particularly infantry, and their cavalry is nothing to sneeze at either. So let's jump in to the campaign start at a typical beginning point for the Kingdom of Dorwinion. Now, there are a couple of different schools of thought out there in terms of the lore and in terms of what Dorwinion actually was in Tolkien's imagination. He only mentions it a couple of times, one of which, of course, is in reference to the wine that was traded up the river towards the Elven King's halls. And that, combined with the fact that Dorwinion does have some Sindarin elements, apparently, in its name, has led some people to the idea that this was an elven kingdom. Perhaps it was established by some of those Sindarin princes who, over the ages, moved into the eastern parts of Middle-earth and set up kingdoms or principalities for themselves among the native Avari elves, or perhaps it was simply an Avari outpost on its own. On the other hand, this is the Dominion of Men. This mod takes place in the 4th Age. Its subtitle is Dominion of Men. And there is another school of thought that argues that, no, this would most likely be a Mannish kingdom. And so that's the direction that this mod has taken things. It's potentially possible for both theories to be true, right? You can imagine an early elven kingdom of Dorwinion, and then with the drawing to a close of the 3rd Age and the dawn of the Dominion of Men, potentially men taking over. Certainly in this mod, we have gone with a Mannish kingdom, and so to that extent, you'll find that you are a Mannish culture faction. All of your troops are men, and so that's what we have. We start here with these 2 very nice settlements, actually. Belligant is your capital, and this is a powerhouse. It has the advantage of starting with some very nice timber walls that cannot be broken down by rams or anything like that, so you can get your archers up there, skirmishers, and throw arrows and javelins down at any approaching enemy. So this is very handy at the beginning. Rathwin is not so lucky in its initial walls, only having a small palisade, but it can tech up fairly quickly, and you will have a pretty decent economy as Dorwinion if you choose things carefully in terms of your wars. Looking at diplomacy to start, we find that we're neutral to everybody. We do not even have any war going on with the rebels. And one way we can tell this is by you can look at this little blue trade route going from your port, your capital, all the way to this island here, which is actually a rebel settlement. So as long as you don't attack the rebels at any point, you could theoretically just keep trading with these guys. That's not going to be such a great benefit, honestly, because there are not too many rebels in the area. If we toggle the fog of war and look at how you are situated at the beginning, there are only a couple, really. There's Hythe here on the island, which is an unwalled settlement, but it is a very good idea to take this because it is unlikely that other factions are going to get here before you, and even once you get here and set it up yourself, you'll probably be left alone on this island. Even if you're at war with Rune, they're very slow to invade here in terms of naval invasions, so just get some rudimentary walls up there and you should be fine. Yarhelkar is another settlement that does border you, but again, it's unwalled, it's not well developed, and it's relatively poor. It doesn't have a port, just a basic fishing village. So I would not necessarily recommend grabbing this early. One sure thing is that if you grab this early, you are very likely to get into an early war with either North Rune or Rune, or both, because they will both be expanding and trying to eliminate the rebels adjacent to them as well, and this is one of these. So once all those rebel settlements are gone, the wars are going to start, if not before. We do, however, also border the Dwarves. It's fairly rare that factions border the Dwarves in this mod. There are a couple of places where it happens, but for you, the Dwarves are more relevant than they are for many other factions in the mod. And this is because you'll be passing from your capital potentially down into this part of the world with some frequency. You may be at war with Rovanion, you may be at war with Rune, and one easy way to do that is to cross through this arm of Dwarven territory. Now, doing that in one turn is fine, But if you ever find yourself stopped, like out of movement points on Dwarven territory, you are likely to be attacked. So do keep that in mind as you move through the area. However, it is worth noting that taking this settlement for yourself, not a bad idea if you can pull it off. The earlier the better, because of course the more time you leave the dwarves to sit around here, the more they will train troops, and they're going to get higher quality. Initially, there are only 4 units here. I believe one of them is going to be a family member. 2 of them are hirelings, that is, mannish allies of the dwarves, and as such, they're going to be weaker than the dwarven units that can otherwise be trained. And the other one is either a unit of axe throwers or dwarven axes, something along those lines. So this is probably the most manageable dwarven settlement you could get. But it's not worth going for this immediately, I would say. So who are your threats in the area? Well, you are a Northman faction, and as such, you may be tempted to form a grand alliance with your other Northmen neighbors, such as the Kingdom of Dorwinion, who share a nice big border with you to your west, or the quite powerful Kingdom of Dale, who is this blue faction to your north. And you might seek to, again, ally with those Northmen in order to protect yourself against the depredations of the Easterlings of North Rune and the larger Chiefdom of Rune. That would make a certain amount of sense, but the problem is Dale is a very aggressive faction, and if you just let them prosecute their war against North Rune and Rune itself, you'll be facing an absolute monster of a neighbor to your north. So after several starts, I've played this campaign a few times to various degrees of success. The most successful campaigns I have as Dorwinion end up with me taking Dale and basically becoming the new Dale. And so in the campaign we're going to look at in a little while here, that's what I've done. From turn 1, I busied myself with the task of training troops out of both of my initial settlements immediately, just training them up pretty much every turn until I got what was essentially full stacks in each town, and then marching a decent army north, going straight for Dale, not even taking these other settlements on the way, just going straight for them and declaring war with an attack on their capital. This is a very tricky move to pull off because Dale is allied with the dwarves. So if you find yourself at war with Dale, which you should, you will find yourself also at war with the dwarves. Now that's going to be a great reason for you eventually to come down and take Nereg Zagil here. But again, I think it's more important initially to take out Dale. This is because while the dwarves are set to be passive when they are controlled by the AI, that is, they will defend their own lands but do little else, Dale is manifestly not. Dale is extremely aggressive. They are incredibly wealthy because of these couple of settlements here and all the trade that can be generated with the elves and the dwarves and their own other settlements. They will be producing high-tier units from very early on and sending them into your neighborhood, and as soon as they think it's likely they're going to attack you, they're going to want this territory for themselves. And who can blame them? It's incredibly wealthy, and that's going to be your saving grace, because even though you'll have to train every turn, you'll have to sink thousands of Mirian into large military development projects just to maintain sort of that competitive edge, you will be supported by your trade. And if you can actually maintain trading partners and early alliances, that will be a big help to you. One thing that I tend to do early is send my diplomats around and get trade. So if we were to sort of see what this might look like, I have a diplomat here that starts right next to your capital, and there's a dwarven diplomat as well. You can go to him, you can offer trade rights, and you can demand some money. Now, I don't know if this is going to work here, but usually I ask for something like 1,500, and we see what they say. And they'll give 460. So we could haggle back and forth, and maybe they would get me something like, 800 or 900. Let's go with that. And they're going to pay me 400 for 2 turns. Sure, why not? So we're making a little bit of money doing this. And then we'll send this guy around, and maybe we'll ally with North Rune. We're going to try for trade rights. We're going to try for some payment and see what they want, how much they're willing to pay for it. They paid us 1,000 to trade. Let's see if they'll pay us another 1,000. Let's go for 3, actually, for an alliance. Okay, so that's two too generous for some reason. So maybe on the next turn we can try that. Usually you can get a good amount of money out of Northrune for an alliance, because in another turn or so they will be at war not only with Dale but with the Dwarves as well. So the Dwarves will join Dale in Dale's wars. And so that will cause Northrune to start to feel the pinch. Now, because you're going to be sending diplomats around and trying to get trading rights and or selling trading rights as well as alliances, you will want to trade some diplomats in your other settlements initially. So take some time to do that occasionally. I like to have 3 or 4 initially. I want to send some down around here to Dorwinion, one over to the Bjornings. I want to ally with these other factions. The Bjornings are important as well because they are a way of kind of driving a wedge between Dale and their other allies. If you look, you see that Dale is blessed with 2 allies. They have the Dwarves, which they're not going to lose most likely as allies, but they will also have the Bjornings. Now, the Bjornings can cause problems for Dale. They control this sort of central part of the Greenwood. And Dale does control territory along the northern part, but otherwise their power center is focused kind of in the east. So what you can do is ally with the Bjornings, and then when you attack Dale, it is likely that the Bjornings will side with you. Make sure that you're the one doing the attacking, and the AI will often choose the attacker when it has to decide who to keep as an ally. So if you do that, you'll be stripping Dale of an ally. If you get trade rights and an alliance with Dorwinion early on, and then you attack Dale soon enough, again, you'll have a nice ally here on your west. And if you're lucky, Dorwinion will go to war with a faction like a Dunabar, maybe Rune, and not cause problems for you, at least for a while. All that time, you're training, you're building up higher tier walls in Rathwin, building up higher tier military development in Belligant, and of course working on your trade and economy as well, and getting a stack together to send into the heart of the evil empire. And you're also hoping that you can get an alliance and trade out of these Easterling factions to keep them off your back for as long as possible, as long as it takes for you to get established up here. Once you've got Dale and Esgaroth, I think you're pretty much all set. Let's take a quick look at the buildings here, and then we'll look at a campaign in progress for Dorwinion. Now, Belligant, again, is an extremely wealthy settlement. It has the potential to be, and it is quite well situated. You get to start an option at the beginning of 2 different industries. You can go for animal husbandry and fishing because you do have a fish resource here, or you could go with estates and farmlands, and this would be to exploit your wine. This is the one you're going to want to do. This is the one that's going to bring in lots of money. Not with this building itself, but you're going to eventually be able to build wineries and then grand vineyards and things like that. That's going to really boost your trade income. But you'll also want to neglect you will not want to neglect other sources of income, including land tax. So if you look, for example, at irrigation, this is a very high tier farm. When I click to build this, you'll notice that my land tax is increasing by a couple hundred. The nice thing about land tax is that it is resilient. In other words, it is not affected by wars. So if I am at war with a faction, that trade income is no longer coming in, right? I'm not getting those trade rights. I'm not trading with them anymore. That can leave you very vulnerable as Dorwinion because you're a very small faction, and if you're going to war with all of your neighbors, a huge part of your income is trade. So again, you want to keep your wars short and focused if possible, but as kind of a form of insurance, choosing buildings that increase your land tax is a good move to make. Otherwise, your capital is a chief city, and so that means you will have no restrictions in terms of building. So you can build all 4 tiers of your military development, and you can build up roads, you can build high-tier markets, and all those good things. The military development is quite good for Dorwinion. Again, we're going to be looking in more detail in a separate guide video about that. But you get essentially at your first couple of tiers basically Rovanian style units. They're not as rugged, they're not as well armed, but they do have some advantages in terms of low cost, low upkeep, and they're fairly robust. You will struggle to send these guys against Easterlings potentially, but your hunters, your bowmen are really good. Kind of a strength of Dorwinion is their ranged game. You get these basic archers, which are quite cheap. You also, a notable unit is Rovanian foresters, which are just a great skirmish unit. At the higher tiers, though, and the reason that you're going to want to develop these military buildings to the highest level in your homelands for sure, is that you get units like Dorwinion Watch, and eventually these fantastic Dorwinion halberdiers, and the very solid and respectable Dorwinion men-at-arms as well. Some of these units are more inspired by sort of Dúnedainic style weapons, arms, things like that. So definitely worth teching up in terms of your military, and it might even be worth turning Rathwin into a military-focused settlement as opposed to financial. This is what I tend to do because I don't want one settlement to be doing all of my military training for those high-tier troops. A real danger, again, with Dorwinion is being outproduced by your neighbors who tend to be larger than you, at least initially. And so I like to have, theoretically, a couple of places where I could train halberdiers, a couple of places where I could train Dorwinion Watch without having to send back and forth to get reinforcements. To a large extent, especially if you're off fighting Dale with your main army, you're going to want to think of your two settlements as self-sustaining. You don't want to have to support one to the other because although it looks like you have these mountains to your south, sea to your east, and river to your north, your neighbors really can just walk all through here and besiege you and attack you in both places. So it's going to be kind of a challenge, so tech up those cities accordingly. All right, let's load up a campaign in progress to see where we are in terms of Dorwinion after about 20 or 30 turns. And again, in this campaign, I did pretty much what I described, getting trade rights with all of my neighbors, and except with Dale, because I knew I was going to be attack them as soon as possible. I kept an eye on the war between Dale and North Rune, and it turned out that nothing much happened. In fact, you can still see that North Rune is in possession of their starting settlements. They haven't lost anything to Dale, so they're in a quite strong position. We are still allies currently, and I still have allies in the Bjornings, Rovanion, and both of the Easterling neighbors, so that's great. But I am a little concerned that that these guys are going to head south. To that end, though, I've been stuffing my capital with decent troops. It's got those high walls, so I want to make sure I've got plenty of archers to man it. And against Easterling troops, you'll do well if you have just a couple of units of your high-tier things to hold off a choke point. Like, so I've got a couple of Dorwinion Watch, and I've got a Dorwinion Men-at-Arms unit. The other stuff should be okay. Same type of thing over here. We've got some halberdiers as well, but otherwise it's fairly low-tier stuff. So again, what I did initially, you can see all I have at this point, this is 369, so it's maybe 30 turns or so. I basically came right up and took Dale and then Esgaroth very shortly thereafter. I'm about to take Yodor. I've played a little past this point. And at that point, my realm will be essentially connected with the exception of Bern. There's a reason, though, that I did not bother taking Bern and Yodor on my way up to Dale, and that's because these settlements are small potatoes in terms of what Dale can train out of them, whereas this is just their economic powerhouse and their military powerhouse. They've got a huge military development barracks here that's already built, and so they're going to be training monstrous units out of it, and so you need to put a stop to that quickly. So just ignore all of these settlements, go straight to Dale, and this is the remnants of the army that I used to take it. So what do we have here? I had a couple of family members. I had 2 or 3 units of riders, including room for some mercenaries that I found along the way. A couple of local mercenaries are these Dale longbowmen mercs. You can find them, of course, in Dale's homelands. Pretty much anywhere north of the River Running, you can find some. I brought some of my starting units that you begin with in your capital, some men-at-arms, halberdiers, and Dorwinion Watch. But then, honestly, I had very basic things. I had several units of bows, I had a couple of spearmen and some Rovanion foresters. And so these guys, plus these guys who are just manning the garrison in Esgaroth, that's what I used to take down Dale. It can be a very tricky battle, and one thing you have to watch for is support from the Dwarves, because although the Dwarves will stay on their own territory and they will not invade your own territory, they will attack you if you are on Dale's land, especially right around here. So you want to make sure that you are that you're not going to get attacked by the Dwarves. And so one thing you can do is set right up right on this river crossing. That can be a great way to do it, because when they counterattack, you're defending the ford. Or you can sort of march all the way around. That's actually what I did. This time I sort of went all the way around here because I I had some trouble initially with crashes when the battle was resolved, so I didn't want to lose the battle that way. And I attacked an army that was actually standing right outside the settlement and took it by storm. So going for Dale quickly basically cuts their realm in half, and they have not been able to recover from that. The other thing is, once Eodor falls, I'm going to think long and hard before taking Bern and the Fort of Karnan. These two settlements are really next to choke points, but they're also border points. And so, in other words, if I take this, I've extended my border with Rovanion. That's going to incite them to attack me, potentially. And if I take this, I've extended my border with North Rune. That's going to incite them potentially to attack me here. If Dale keeps these, fine. They're not going to be much good to them. I can keep them under siege for a long time while my army moves into the west, takes Hjorth for sure, maybe Framsburg, but maybe I leave them that and try to make them a protectorate. You can see that my finances currently are not doing too well, but I've been doing a ton of building here. I've been building my military development up to the highest point, and I've been working on my infrastructure with wineries and things like that. In Rathwin, I sprung for the highest or the higher tier of walls, the wooden walls here that allow archers to stand on the top, just because I'm worried that I'm going to get attacked by Rovanion or by North Rune at some point. Now, again, this is early stages in a Dorwinion campaign, but it is, I think, helpful to see that at this point I'm feeling quite secure. This has gotten me a couple of really, really rich territories in my enemy's heartlands, and I'm winding down the war with them. And in my own homelands, I've got very solid armies, and I'm looking at some decent amount of income. Once I take Eodor, my income will skyrocket, and I'll be getting a ton of money. So all this stuff redounds to your benefit in terms of your finances. All the work that you're doing in terms of your military stuff ultimately ends up back in your coffers. So I hope this is helpful as one vision of what is possible, at least as a start for Dorwinion. This is a very difficult campaign. We've got them rated as, I think, bull roaring rather than laughing at live dragons, but I almost think laughing at live dragons might be the more accurate designation for them. Dorwinion, again, has a fantastic roster, and we'll look at that in more detail in the battle video. But the campaign, the opening, up until you get over that hump where you've got a secure position for yourself, it is very, very tricky. One last point before I sign off. You may notice that the Dwarves have conquered Breg Estelad. Now, that may seem to contradict what I mentioned about the Dwarves never expanding their defensive when they're controlled by the AI, and that is true. Breg Estelad fell to bribery. And this is something you need to worry about when you're playing any faction in here. Because if you go to war with Dale, you're going to go to war with the Dwarves. Just because they share an alliance just like the Roman factions did in Vanilla Rome Total War. And what that means is, although they are a passive faction, their emissaries are not. They will send diplomats around. They will bribe up tiny little armies that you have moving along the map to get reinforced. This happened to me recently. I had 3 units of chewed up cav that I wanted to send back down here to get retrained. And Dwarves bribed them like as soon as I set them outside of the settlement. And this was bribed away from probably Rune. I think Rune took this, and because the Dwarves are at war with Rune, they bribed it, and they now have started garrisoning it. I'm not sure if this is hirelings. I'm not sure if they've built up to that point, or if they're training dwarves and siege weapons and terrifying things like that and are sending them down to garrison this. But this is actually kind of perfect for me, because what this means is if I end up at war with Rovanion, I now feel a whole lot better about taking Arab Gobel, Andiath, and Ra, because I don't see Rune taking back Breg Estelad. The AI, you'll notice, is very, very hesitant to attack the Dwarves in a lot of cases. So this is kind of a nice buffer they've provided me. Yes, we're at war, but eventually I'll take Nerg Zagil for myself, and they can have Breg Estelad. At any rate, folks, this is a very fun faction, but extremely challenging. Will definitely keep you on your toes, and I highly recommend it. So keep an eye out for the battle guide video that will be coming out shortly, and until then, have a great day, everybody.